Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back into the foggy streets of Victorian London, a place where gas lamps flicker like tired fireflies, casting long shadows over cobblestone roads. You find yourself wandering through a narrow alleyway, your footsteps echoing off the worn brick walls. The air is damp, thick with the scent of coal smoke, and something faintly floral, perhaps lavender, or perhaps something more peculiar, depending on who's brewing what nearby. Tonight's journey will lead you through a world obsessed with sleep, or more precisely, with the lack of it. Victorians had some truly strange beliefs about insomnia, ideas that would make even the wildest wellness influencers today raise an eyebrow. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a single night with their sleep remedies. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, leave a comment telling me your local time and where in the world you're listening from. I love seeing where we all gather from, like a sleepy little map of dreamers. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk onward past the dim windows of townhouses stacked tightly like books on a shelf. Curtains are drawn, but here and there a faint glow spills out. You can almost see the shapes of people inside. Restless figures pacing back and forth, their minds too troubled to sleep. Yes, in Victorian London, insomnia wasn't just a personal nuisance. It was a subject of public fascination. And right now, you're about to witness it firsthand. The year is 1875, and insomnia has become something of a fashionable affliction. Odd, isn't it? Today, people hide their sleepless nights behind under-eye concealer and overpriced coffee orders. But here they practically boast about it. You pause outside a coffee house, though it's not quite the kind of place you're imagining. No lattes or oat milk here. Instead, it's filled with gentlemen wearing top hats slightly askew, discussing the latest scandal in the Times and their sleepless nights as if comparing exotic illnesses. One man gestures dramatically, claiming he hasn't slept in 3 nights, and instead of sympathy, his companions nod in admiration. They sip their thick black coffee, boiled until nearly bitter sludge, and lean in as he describes the strange visions that come to him in the dead of night. You step closer, eavesdropping without shame. He speaks of how insomnia sharpens the mind, how some nights he feels as though he's unlocked the very secrets of the universe. His friends laugh knowingly, though you suspect they're half delirious themselves. In Victorian society, insomnia became entangled with ideas of brilliance and refinement. It wasn't seen merely as an ailment, it was almost a badge of honour, especially among artists, philosophers, and high society thinkers. You can't help but smirk. Imagine proudly announcing at brunch today that you're chronically sleep-deprived, hoping for admiration. Though, come to think of it, some people still do that. Oh, I only got 4 hours last night, but I'm still grinding. Humans haven't changed that much apparently, but not everyone embraced the sleepless nights with such romantic flair. Across the city, tucked into quieter neighbourhoods, many others suffered in silence. You drift past a modest home, its windows fogged from within. A woman sits by the hearth, clutching a worn shawl around her shoulders, rocking gently in her chair. Her husband snores loudly upstairs, blissfully unaware. She, however, cannot seem to summon the mercy of sleep. Victorians blamed everything from weak nerves to poor digestion for their insomnia, and they weren't shy about treating it with creative methods. You chuckle softly as you remember reading about the popular bedtime tonics of the day, mixtures containing everything from alcohol to laudanum, wrapped up in dainty labels promising restful nights and soothing repose. The irony isn't lost on you. People would literally drink opium-laced syrups and then act surprised when they woke up feeling a bit off. But back to your evening stroll. You feel the cool fog beginning to thicken, curling around your ankles like ghostly cats. Somewhere in the distance a church bell tolls, a deep mournful sound marking the late hour. As you walk, you begin to notice something peculiar. Nearly every window you pass has a flicker of candlelight still burning. It's as though the entire city has collectively agreed not to sleep tonight. In truth, that wasn't far from reality. During this era, London was gripped by what many called an epidemic of sleeplessness. Doctors wrote entire treatises about it. Newspapers printed letters from anguished readers, and even the Queen herself reportedly consulted her physicians about her troubled nights. Of course, historians still debate whether insomnia truly became more common during this period, or whether people simply started talking about it more openly. Some suggest it was a side effect of industrialization, longer working hours, noisy streets, and the looming anxiety of modern life. Others believe it was always there, merely hidden behind lace curtains and stiff upper lips. Either way, here you are, wandering through a city both obsessed and tormented by the mysteries of sleep. You pause once more, gazing up at a window where a shadowy figure paces back and forth. You can almost hear their thoughts spiraling, worries about money, family, or perhaps something far more peculiar. And just as you're about to move on, you spot a small sign outside a nearby shop. It reads, "Remedies for nervous sleeplessness sold here." How convenient and suspicious. You smile faintly. Your journey through Victorian insomnia is just beginning, and with that you take another step forward, the city's whispers drawing you deeper into the night. You continue your slow walk through the misty streets, your steps muffled by the thick fog wrapping around London tonight. There's a strange sort of hush in the air. Only the distant clip-clop of horses and the occasional rattle of carriage wheels remind you that others still roam these streets. Before long you find yourself standing before an ornate townhouse, its iron gates slightly ajar. The scent of roses mingles with coal smoke, and you can't help but peek inside. Inside, in a richly furnished sitting room glowing with lamplight, you see a small gathering of elegantly dressed men and women. They sip tea from fine porcelain cups, their laughter soft and restrained. Their conversation, however, circles endlessly around one shared concern: sleeplessness. Tonight you're stepping into a world where insomnia has become fashionable. Yes, in the Victorian era, it wasn't merely an inconvenience, it was something of a status symbol. You drift closer, hearing snippets of their discussion. One woman, draped in a gown of emerald velvet, leans in and confesses, "I simply cannot sleep a wink. It's this dreadful nervous energy." She dabs her forehead with a lace handkerchief, looking both distressed and oddly pleased with herself. Her companions nod sympathetically, but also, you notice, with a trace of envy. You can't help but chuckle under your breath. Somehow, in this world, insomnia has become a marker of sophistication, a sign that you're simply too sensitive, too refined, too brilliant to be lulled by ordinary sleep. Of course, they wouldn't put it quite like that. Instead, they murmur about nervous exhaustion and overstimulation of the brain, which sounds very scientific and respectable. You listen as another guest, a distinguished gentleman with silver hair and sharp eyes, begins to explain that many of the greatest minds in history were notorious insomniacs. He lists them off dramatically: Napoleon, Voltaire, Charles Dickens. To him, the message is clear. If you're not sleeping, you must be destined for greatness. You can't help but laugh softly at the irony. Today we call that hustle culture. But back then, it was simply the cost of genius. Still, it wasn't only the upper classes who embraced this strange pride in sleeplessness. You hear murmurs of others, artists, writers, and even students who wore their dark circles like medals of honor. One woman sighs dramatically and says, "Of course it's always been worse for us women. Our delicate constitutions, you know." Her companions agree solemnly, though you sense a hint of performative suffering. Ah yes, another peculiar Victorian belief, that women with their weaker nerves were particularly vulnerable to the ravages of insomnia. Some even argued that women were more likely to suffer from sleeplessness simply because they were too emotional, too prone to worry. You can almost hear modern psychologists groaning in the distance. As you watch the group, another guest, a young man with an artistic flair and a dramatically floppy hairstyle, leans forward and speaks in hushed tones about the latest theory sweeping the salons. Apparently, some doctors now believe that too much reading can cause sleeplessness. You blink, caught between amusement and disbelief. "Too much reading," he repeats, eyes wide, "especially of novels." You stifle a laugh, imagining today's book clubs dissolving into scandal at such a suggestion. Yet in this candle-lit room, the idea is taken very seriously. They nod gravely, discussing the dangers of overstimulation. One woman admits she recently had to stop reading her favourite serial because it left her far too agitated to sleep. You shake your head gently, smiling. Somewhere between their pearl necklaces and patent medicines, they've created an entire culture where even their worries about insomnia are tinged with vanity. Still, you can't deny that beneath the theatrics, there's a genuine sense of distress here. These people may boast of their sleeplessness, but they also seem desperate for relief. You notice how many of them sip not only tea, but also something stronger. A golden liquid in tiny glass bottles, discreetly passed from hand to hand. You lean closer to catch the label on one such bottle. Doctor. Wren's Nerve Elixir, for immediate repose. You can't help but grin. Immediate repose indeed. Victorian remedies were rarely subtle, and many of these tonics contained powerful ingredients: alcohol, chloroform, even laudanum, a potent mix of alcohol and opium. You watch as the guests drink their elixirs, their eyes growing heavier, their voices softer, though some seem almost giddy instead of relaxed. You've stumbled upon another of their odd contradictions. While they feared sleeplessness, they also embraced substances that could bring relief, regardless of the cost. As you linger in the corner of the room, unnoticed by the drowsy guests, you can't help but reflect on how little has changed. Even today, people chase sleep with pills and potions, hoping for a quick fix. Some historians still argue about whether Victorian insomnia was truly as widespread as it seemed. Was it a genuine epidemic, or simply a fashionable complaint among those who had the time and luxury to dwell on it? The question lingers as you quietly slip away from the glowing windows, back into the fog-drenched street. Behind you, the laughter fades into soft murmurs, and you can almost hear the rustle of silk gowns and the clink of glass as another round of nerve elixirs is poured. You smile to yourself as you continue your slow walk, the city's strange dance with sleeplessness drawing you further into its folds. The night is still young, and there are many more peculiar remedies, beliefs, and nighttime rituals awaiting you in the shadows. The night grows colder as you wander deeper into the maze of streets, the fog curling thicker, almost as if the city itself is exhaling its worries. Your breath forms soft clouds in the air, and somewhere in the distance, a clock tower strikes another hour. Though whether it's midnight or later, you've already lost track. You drift toward another townhouse, its windows glowing faintly. The curtains are only half drawn, and you can just glimpse the scene inside. A small drawing room, where a group sits in hushed conversation, their faces lit by flickering gas lamps. You edge closer, pressing your ear toward the glass. Inside, the topic has shifted from insomnia as a fashion statement to something far more peculiar. Dreams. You watch as an elderly woman, wrapped in shawls and weighed down by enough jewellery to set off modern airport alarms, leans forward and speaks in a dramatic whisper. They say that dreams drain your life force, she intones, her voice wavering between awe and fear. The others gasp softly, leaning in. They say if you dream too often, she continues, you'll grow pale, weak, even ill. You raise an eyebrow. Now this is new. In Victorian times, dreams weren't just seen as harmless flickers of imagination. Many believed that too much dreaming could weaken the body, literally siphoning off your vitality as you slept. You can't help but snicker under your breath. Imagine explaining that to your over-caffeinated friend who insists they hardly dream anymore. They might think it a blessing. Inside, another woman nods fervently, adding, "It's why I refuse to nap during the day. They say it's the worst. Daydreams steal even more energy than those at night." Her companions murmur in agreement, looking appropriately scandalized. You watch as one gentleman, clearly eager to outdo them all, boasts that he has mastered the art of empty sleeping, falling into a deep, dreamless state through sheer willpower. He doesn't explain how, of course. Trade secrets, perhaps. It's strange to think how something as universal as dreaming could once have been viewed with such suspicion. Then again, the Victorians feared many things, especially those they couldn't control. You glance around the room, noting how they clutch their hands together, glancing nervously at the dark corners where shadows stretch and flicker. The gas lamps sputter slightly, making their faces look almost ghostly. Dreams were considered dangerous because they opened a door to the unknown, to forbidden desires, to strange visions, to things polite society didn't dare name aloud. One woman shudders and recalls the story of a friend who dreamt too vividly, so vividly in fact that she began to waste away within weeks. They called it dream sickness, and doctors were quick to prescribe rest and stronger medicines. You can't help but marvel at the contradictions. Here were people terrified of their own minds, yet eager to experiment with every drug and tonic they could find. It's said some Victorians even went so far as to tie themselves to their beds to prevent the body from acting out dreams, anything to keep the nocturnal terrors at bay. You shake your head, amused and slightly horrified. Yet perhaps the oddest belief of all was this: that dreaming wasn't merely a personal risk, it could also be contagious. Yes, some feared that the mere act of hearing someone else describe their dreams could trigger your own, as those stories might seed themselves in your subconscious, ready to sprout as nightmares. You smile softly. It's almost poetic in a way. Still, not everyone agreed on the dangers of dreams. You hear one man in the room clear his throat and declare, "Nonsense. Dreams are merely the workings of the brain digesting the day's thoughts." He sounds rather modern, you think, until he follows up by recommending that anyone troubled by bad dreams should simply avoid cheese after sunset. You stifle a laugh. Ah yes, the infamous cheese theory. Many Victorians firmly believed that eating cheese at night would trigger wild, disturbing dreams. Some even kept detailed diaries, logging which cheeses produced which types of dreams. Brie for strange visions, Stilton for nightmares, and so forth. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were rooted in actual physical effects, or just the power of suggestion. Cheese certainly can be rich and heavy, but whether it truly sparks night terrors remains a matter of debate. Still, you can't deny the charm of the idea. Somewhere in this city, there were people carefully rationing their cheddar to avoid unspeakable horrors in their sleep. You watch the conversation wind down as the clock strikes again, somewhere between 1 and 2, by your guess. The guests rise, gathering their coats and scarves, preparing to brave the fog once more. They seem more relaxed now, as if sharing their fears has eased their burdens, at least for tonight. You remain by the window a moment longer, watching as they drift away into the misty streets, their shapes fading into shadows. Behind you, the city hums softly. Somewhere nearby, another lamplighter makes his rounds, the glow of his torch marking tiny islands of warmth against the cold night. And as you continue your walk, you can't help but wonder, how many of these people will fall asleep tonight, their minds racing with thoughts of stolen dreams, forbidden desires, and sinister slices of cheese? The night stretches on ahead of you, and there are still many strange remedies and rituals to discover before dawn. You take another step forward, the fog swallowing your footprints, your path guided now by curiosity and just a hint of dread. You continue your slow, steady walk through the hushed streets, the gas lamps flickering faintly above you. The fog seems to part just enough for you to glimpse the next peculiar stop on your journey. Ahead, a little apothecary shop catches your eye. The wooden sign swings gently in the breeze, creaking ever so slightly, and in ornate lettering it promises cures for sleeplessness, nerves, and general agitation. You push open the door, a soft chime ringing through the shop, and immediately you're met with an overwhelming scent, a mixture of lavender, camphor, and something vaguely metallic. Inside, the shelves groan under the weight of countless glass bottles, each adorned with handwritten labels in looping script. The glow of a single oil lamp bathes the room in amber light, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the walls. Behind the counter stands a man with a pointed moustache and a crisp waistcoat, who greets you with a knowing nod. "Trouble sleeping, I presume?" he asks, his voice silky and low, as though he's spoken that line 1,000 times. You nod, if only to see where this leads. He gestures grandly to the shelves behind him. "We have just the thing," he purrs. "Our most popular remedy is the midnight calm draught, guaranteed to lull even the most tormented mind." You lean in to read the label, and your eyebrows rise. Ingredients: alcohol, laudanum, and something called soothing bitters. A charming euphemism, no doubt. The apothecary notices your curiosity and chuckles softly. "Ah, yes," he says, "a most effective mixture. Quite safe in moderate doses, of course. The tonic not only induces restful sleep, but also quiets nervous fits and melancholy thoughts." You can't help but smirk. In other words, it knocks you out cold. Victorian remedies for insomnia often walked a very fine line between medicine and outright narcotics. Laudanum, after all, was nothing more than opium dissolved in alcohol, easily purchased over the counter, no questions asked. You glance around and spot another intriguing bottle. Nightshade elixir for delicate nerves. You don't need to be a botanist to know that nightshade isn't exactly a bedtime snack. The apothecary follows your gaze and smiles knowingly. "Ah, yes, a bit stronger, for those more stubborn cases." You stifle a laugh, imagining the absurdity of recommending belladonna to someone who simply can't stop scrolling their Victorian equivalent of social media. Perhaps a serialized novel, or heaven forbid, an overzealous chess habit. You wander deeper into the shop, marvelling at the sheer array of so-called sleep aids. Powders, syrups, tablets, even sachets of herbs, meant to be tucked beneath one's pillow. Some promise to soothe the humours, others to balance the vapours, and a few simply assure immediate repose. No further explanation needed. You can't help but notice how many remedies contain alcohol in some form. Brandy tinctures, fortified cordials, even wine spiked with mysterious ingredients. It seems the Victorians had a simple philosophy: if you can't sleep, drink until you do. But there's more to it than just the potions. You notice a small section devoted to mechanical devices, strange contraptions that resemble headbands, belts, or even tiny cages meant to be worn at night. The apothecary notices your interest and eagerly explains. Ah yes, the cranial pressure band, quite effective. It gently compresses the temples to calm the mind. You raise an eyebrow. He continues unfazed. Some prefer the sleep-inducing chest belt, which restricts the ribs slightly, thought to simulate the comforting embrace of the womb. You nearly snort aloud at that one. But as absurd as these devices sound, many Victorians swore by them. In an era before neuroscience, sleep was seen as a matter of physical pressure and alignment as much as mental calm. Still, even then, some people question these methods. You overhear the apothecary muttering to himself as he straightens the shelves. Of course, not every tonic works for every soul, he sighs. Some people simply carry too much darkness inside. Historians still debate whether Victorian insomnia was more physical or psychological, whether it stemmed from polluted air and cramped quarters, or from anxieties about morality, industrialization, and rapid change. Perhaps it was both. You thank the apothecary with a polite nod, though you wisely leave empty-handed. Something tells you that waking up after a night on midnight calm draught would feel worse than the insomnia itself. As you step back into the fog, the air feels cooler, the streets quieter still. You glance back at the glowing windows of the apothecary shop, now seeming almost like a beacon in the night. Somewhere inside, you imagine another customer is already purchasing their own vial of oblivion, desperate for rest. You can't help but wonder, how many of London's restless souls are drifting tonight, their dreams twisted by opium and alcohol, their bodies heavy with artificial sleep. And yet, the night continues, as it always does. The city exhales softly around you, and you take another step forward, ready to discover the next strange chapter in this curious tale of sleeplessness. The fog thickens as you leave the apothecary behind, your footsteps muffled by the damp cobblestones. The streets grow quieter now, and the lamplight barely pushes back the darkness creeping in from every corner. As you walk, a peculiar scent catches your attention, a faint trace of something sweet and smoky, drifting lazily through the air. You follow it curious until you arrive at a quiet alleyway where a door stands slightly ajar. A soft amber glow spills out, and with it comes the unmistakable aroma of opium. You step inside. The room before you is dim, thick with smoke that curls lazily toward the ceiling. Plush cushions are scattered across the floor, and stretched out upon them are men and women alike, their faces slack with dreamy half-smiles. Here, the struggle against insomnia takes on a far more decadent form. Opium dens were not uncommon in Victorian London, though they existed in a strange shadow realm, half tolerated, half feared. Officially, they were frowned upon. Unofficially, many of the very same people who preached temperance by day found themselves here by night. You watch as a gentleman in a rumpled cravat leans over a small brass pipe, inhaling deeply, his eyes fluttering shut. His expression shifts from exhaustion to blissful detachment within moments. It's hard not to marvel at the scene, so serene, so quiet, so disconnected. For some Victorians, opium wasn't just a vice. It was a nightly ritual, a ticket to dreamless, uninterrupted sleep. You drift farther into the room, taking in the faint murmur of conversation among the more lucid patrons. They speak of their nervous afflictions, their inability to quiet their minds, their desperate need for rest. One woman, draped in silks that shimmer even in the dim light, sighs theatrically and explains how opium has become her only salvation. Without it, she says, her nights stretch endlessly, filled with racing thoughts and an ache that no other remedy can soothe. You can't help but notice the glazed look in her eyes, the way her words seem to float, as if she's speaking from underwater. Another man, older and more gaunt, mumbles something about the dreams. The vivid, haunting dreams that come not during sleep, but in the space between waking and unconsciousness. He almost seems to relish them. And here lies the strange paradox of opium. For many Victorians it was both cure and curse. Yes, it could deliver sleep, or at least something that felt close enough. But it also brought with it strange visions, an altered sense of reality, and eventually dependence. Some users claim to have found profound insights during these opium-fueled reveries, moments of clarity that they insisted made the price worthwhile. Others, however, weren't so lucky. You listen as one man recounts how he first tried opium simply to quiet his mind before bed. Now, years later, he finds himself unable to sleep without it. His once mild doses have grown stronger, and the dreams have turned darker. You hear him mutter, "They follow me even when I'm awake now." There's a brief hush in the room, as if everyone is silently measuring their own distance from that same fate. Historians still debate how widespread opium dependence truly was in Victorian London. Some argue it was rampant among every class, from factory workers to aristocrats. Others suggest it was more contained, exaggerated by sensationalized reports. Regardless, it's clear that for many this was the ultimate insomnia remedy, seductive, immediate, and dangerously effective. You step back toward the doorway, the thick air beginning to weigh on you. Your head feels a touch lighter just from breathing it all in. But as you linger, you can't help but notice something else, how quiet the room is, even with so many people inside. No laughter, no idle chatter, just soft sighs and the occasional murmur. It's as if sleep itself has taken physical form here, weaving through the smoke, pressing down on every eyelid. As you leave, the door swings shut behind you with a gentle click, and the fog outside feels almost refreshing by comparison. You walk on, the scent of opium still lingering faintly on your coat. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought drifts lazily through the haze. How many people right now are slipping into that same chemical embrace, chasing sleep they no longer believe they can find on their own? And how many of them will wake tomorrow, if they wake at all? But you push the thought aside. The night is far from over, and there are still countless strange, desperate attempts at rest, waiting to be uncovered in this sleepless city. With a steady breath, you move forward once again, the mist parting just enough to reveal your next destination. You drift farther through the winding streets, each step carrying you deeper into the quiet heart of the city. The fog begins to thin slightly, revealing dark silhouettes of towering townhouses, their chimneys reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. Soon you find yourself standing at the threshold of another house, its door left invitingly ajar, as though expecting a guest like you. Inside, a bedroom glows faintly with the light of a single candle. The scene is deceptively peaceful. Thick velvet drapes block out the street lights, a fire crackles gently in the hearth, and the bed is meticulously made, every sheet tucked tight, every pillow perfectly fluffed. But as you step closer, you notice the tension in the air, an almost obsessive sense of control, of ritual. Here, in this room, you're about to witness one of the oddest Victorian beliefs about insomnia. That even the slightest mistake in your bedding could spell a sleepless night. The woman who lives here, her face pale and drawn from many nights without rest, moves about the room in a familiar, practiced routine. You watch her carefully fluff each pillow, then test the mattress by pressing down in slow, deliberate circles, as if searching for hidden traps. She mutters softly to herself, worried that her bedding might be the cause of her troubles. Victorians believed that the materials used in bedding could have profound effects on sleep. Feather pillows were seen as luxurious but potentially dangerous. Some believed they could overheat the brain. Woolen blankets were praised for their warmth, but suspected of trapping noxious vapours. And don't even get her started on the dangers of cotton. Tonight, this woman is particularly concerned about her mattress, which she has recently replaced. It's stuffed with horsehair, once considered the ideal material for warding off sleeplessness, as it was thought to repel bad energies and prevent dampness from settling in. You watch as she carefully adjusts every corner of the bed, ensuring everything is aligned precisely. She even sprinkles a mixture of dried lavender and hops between the sheets, muttering that it calms the humours. There's something almost touching about her determination, even if it borders on the obsessive. Still, you can't help but notice the irony. In her desperate quest to create the perfect sleep environment, she's worked herself into a state of nervous agitation that no bed could possibly soothe. You suppress a small smile. If she were around today, she'd be the type to own a dozen different sleep-tracking devices, convinced that her insomnia could be solved by the perfect pillow or mattress firmness setting. As she finally slips beneath the covers, her eyes dart anxiously around the room, lingering on a small ceramic pot sitting on the nightstand. Inside is vinegar, yes, vinegar, which she believes will absorb the night air and prevent foul vapours from disturbing her rest. Victorians were obsessed with the idea of miasma, the belief that illness, including insomnia, could be caused by invisible bad air. Many kept bowls of vinegar or camphor near their beds, hoping to purify the atmosphere as they slept. You glance toward the window, noting how tightly sealed it is. No fresh air is allowed in here, only the carefully curated scents of lavender, vinegar, and whatever else lingers in the folds of her drapery. It's stifling, but she seems comforted by it. As she begins to drift into that uneasy state between wakefulness and sleep, her face relaxes, if only slightly. Yet despite all her efforts, there's no guarantee she'll find rest tonight. She knows it too. You can see it in the way her fingers twitch beneath the covers, as though bracing for another long, fruitless night. And you, standing quietly in the corner, can't help but wonder if all her rituals and remedies have trapped her in a cycle she can't escape. Historians still debate whether these elaborate bedtime routines were truly effective, or simply a way for Victorians to exert control over something as uncontrollable as sleep. Some say these habits offered genuine comfort in an unpredictable world. Others argue they only fueled anxiety, making sleep an even more elusive prize. You watch the candle burn lower, its flame shrinking to a faint blue flicker. Soon it will extinguish entirely, plunging the room into darkness. And as it does, you step back into the hallway, leaving her to her silent struggle. Outside, the air feels cooler and clearer, free from the heavy scents and stuffy rituals of that stifling bedroom. But you can't shake the lingering thought. How many nights in how many homes across this city are spent the same way? Tossing and turning under the weight of carefully arranged pillows and strange forgotten superstitions. You pull your coat tighter, the chill beginning to seep through once more. There's something oddly comforting about the fog tonight. It's honest at least, no herbs or horsehair or vinegar required. And as you walk deeper into the quiet streets, you can't help but feel a small wry smile creep across your face. The night is far from over, and your strange winding journey through the world of Victorian insomnia is only just beginning. The fog grows heavier again, curling along the streets like a living thing, wrapping around lampposts and creeping through keyholes. You pull your coat tighter, your footsteps soft and deliberate as you follow the quiet glow of a small chapel up ahead. Its bell tower looms above you, silent and still, but the soft murmur of voices seeps through its thick wooden doors. You step inside. The air here is cool and dry, carrying the faint scent of beeswax and old wood. Candles flicker gently along the stone walls, casting long, trembling shadows that stretch towards the vaulted ceiling. In the front pews, a small congregation kneels in quiet prayer, their heads bowed, hands clasped tightly together. And here, in this dim sanctuary, you stumble upon one of the strangest and most overlooked beliefs of the Victorian age, the link between insomnia and moral decay. To the Victorians, sleep wasn't just a physical need, it was a spiritual act. A clean conscience was believed to be the best pillow, and sleeplessness, they feared, might be a sign of a troubled soul. You watch as an elderly vicar rises from his seat and approaches the group, his robes trailing softly behind him. His voice is low but steady as he speaks. "Let us pray for those among us who suffer from restless nights," he says solemnly. "For it is written that the wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous shall sleep in peace." A few heads nod slowly, as if burdened by their own secret guilt. It seems almost comical at first. This notion that your inability to sleep might mean you've sinned in some hidden way. But here, in this quiet place, you can feel how deeply they believe it. The vicar continues, telling the story of a parishioner who suffered from terrible insomnia until she confessed a long-held lie, after which she slept soundly for the first time in years. His message is clear. Insomnia isn't just a medical issue. It's a symptom of spiritual imbalance. You watch as the congregation listens intently, some looking ashamed, others frightened. One woman clutches her rosary so tightly that her knuckles turn white. It's easy to scoff at such a belief, but you can't deny its lingering hold on people, even today. The idea that guilt or moral failure can keep you awake still creeps into the corners of modern life, even if we no longer say it aloud. The vicar shifts his tone, now speaking of charity, patience, and temperance. Virtues said to soothe the soul and invite restful sleep. He reminds the group that those who indulge in worldly excesses, too much food, drink, or idle entertainment, risk corrupting both their bodies and their dreams. You can't help but smirk. In today's terms, he'd probably wag his finger at anyone binging crime shows at midnight, or scrolling through endless news feeds under the covers. But there's a softer side to this sermon too. He speaks of forgiveness, not just of others, but of oneself. Of letting go of anger and envy before bed. Of releasing old grudges that gnaw at the mind in the dark. As he speaks, you notice how some in the room seem to soften. Their tense shoulders ease slightly, their brows unknit. Perhaps there's something universal in this after all. The quiet act of laying down your worries, if only for a night. Still, not everyone in this era agreed that insomnia was purely a spiritual matter. Some doctors argued that too much focus on guilt and morality only made the problem worse, pushing people deeper into anxiety and self-punishment. They accused the church of turning ordinary sleeplessness into a moral crisis, leaving people trapped in a cycle of shame and wakefulness. Historians still debate this, of course. Some claim Victorian clergy provided comfort to the sleepless. Others say they only deepened the suffering. You watch as the vicar concludes the prayer, his voice fading into the soft hum of the church organ. The congregation slowly rises, their faces a mixture of hope and exhaustion. Some leave quietly while others linger by the candle stands. their fingers tracing the edges of wax-dripped saints. You slip back outside into the cool night air, the fog parting for just a moment as the chapel doors closed behind you. The quiet words still linger in your ears, soft reminders of how deeply intertwined sleep and morality once were in this city. And as you walk once more into the shadowed streets, you can't help but wonder how many people tonight are lying awake, not because of caffeine or bright lights, but because they're haunted by their own mistakes. Perhaps some worries are timeless after all. You take a deep breath of the misty air, your path illuminated by nothing more than the faint glow of the lamps and the distant, steady beat of your own footsteps. The night has more stories yet to tell, and many more sleepless souls waiting in its hidden corners. And so you keep walking, deeper into this strange, restless world. The streets grow quieter as you continue, the fog wrapping itself around you like a heavy woolen cloak. Somewhere nearby, a clock tower chimes softly. 3 bells now, perhaps 4. It hardly matters. Time seems to stretch and blur out here, as elastic and strange as the sleepless minds you've been observing all night. You soon arrive at another curious sight, a brightly lit window revealing a small shop, its walls lined with thick medical books and gleaming glass instruments. The sign above the door reads, Doctor. Percival Finch, specialist in nervous complaints and somnolent disorders. You can't resist. You step inside. The scent of leather and pipe smoke fills your nostrils, along with something vaguely medicinal, perhaps camphor or peppermint oil. Inside, the doctor himself sits behind a great oak desk, surrounded by shelves of anatomical models and jars of mysterious powders. He glances up at you over his spectacles, his face lined but alert. "Ah," he says in a practiced, soothing tone. "Restless, are we? You've come to the right place." He gestures to a nearby chair, a peculiar contraption with wooden runners at its base. You recognize it instantly, a rocking chair. You take a seat, and the moment you do, he begins to push you gently back and forth, the chair creaking in soft rhythm. "To sleep," he says. "You must simply submit to the body's natural mechanics." The Victorians were quite fond of mechanical solutions to sleeplessness, and none was more beloved than the humble rocking chair. You can't help but smile at the simplicity of it. No drugs, no elaborate rituals, just the soothing motion of wood against wood, rocking back and forth like a ship upon a calm sea. But Dr. Finch doesn't stop there. He explains with the pride of a man thoroughly convinced of his own genius that the rocking motion regulates the nerves and aligns the internal humours. According to him, the key to sleep lies in rhythmic, repetitive motion, what he calls the body's cradle reflex. You listen as he recounts case after case of stubborn insomniacs lulled to sleep by nothing more than a chair, some gentle movement, and enough patience. He even demonstrates another invention from the corner of the room. A mechanical bed designed to sway slowly from side to side, simulating the same rocking motion throughout the night. You watch, amused, as he sets it into motion. The bed groans and tilts ever so slightly back and forth, as though it might rock its occupant right out onto the floor. And yet, in his voice you hear genuine conviction. "People forget," he muses, "that we begin our lives in constant motion. The womb sways with every step. Infants sleep best when rocked. Why then should adults not crave the same?" You can't quite argue with his logic, though the sight of a grown man inventing machines to rock himself to sleep is undeniably comical. Still, it's not entirely without merit. Even now you realize many people swear by gentle motion to ease themselves into slumber. Rocking chairs, porch swings, even the hum of a train ride. The doctor continues, now showing you a small device meant to be strapped to the wrist. It's weighted and designed to pulse gently in time with your heartbeat, further coaxing the body towards sleep. He explains that certain nerve endings, particularly in the hands and feet, are sensitive to rhythm, and this device can stimulate them, sending a message to the brain that it's time to rest. You can't help but wonder how many of these ideas were legitimate discoveries, and how many were simply elaborate distractions for desperate minds. Historians still debate the effectiveness of Victorian sleep devices. Some claim they were nothing more than placebos, while others suggest that their focus on rhythm and bodily sensation wasn't entirely misguided. After all, you've certainly felt yourself grow drowsy in a rocking chair, or lulled by the soft sway of a train, haven't you? As Dr. Finch winds down his enthusiastic demonstration, he leans back in his chair, a twinkle in his eye. Of course, he says, the greatest machine for sleep remains the human body itself. One need only learn how to coax it. You smile at the thought, quietly amused by his unwavering faith in gears, springs, and levers. Still, as you rise to leave, you notice something touching about the scene, the quiet hopefulness of it all. In this city of anxious hearts and restless minds, even the simplest, most mechanical solutions carry their own kind of magic. Outside once more, the fog seems lighter, almost welcoming now. You imagine the doctor inside, carefully adjusting his devices for the next visitor, forever tinkering with new ways to guide people back toward that elusive state of rest. And as you walk on, you realize something else. Perhaps sleep isn't just about stillness and silence. Perhaps, in some strange way, it's also about movement, about finding that gentle rhythm that rocks you back and forth, until finally, mercifully, you drift away. With that thought warming your mind, you continue down the cobblestone path, ready to discover the next strange corner of this sleepless city. The city grows quieter still as you continue your slow, deliberate pace through the twisting streets. Even the gas lamps seem to burn lower now, their flames shrinking into meek little flickers against the weight of the night. But then, up ahead, you spot a faint glow spilling from the windows of a modest townhouse. There's something peculiar about the atmosphere surrounding it, the way the light trembles, the strange hush of the street just outside its door. Drawn by curiosity, you approach. Inside, a group of neighbours huddles together in the parlour, their eyes wide with unease. The air feels heavy, thick with the scent of burning herbs and tallow candles. And there, seated rigidly in an armchair by the hearth, is a man who stares blankly ahead, his face pale, his limbs unmoving. You've stumbled into the unsettling world of Victorian sleepwalking, or, as they preferred to call it, noctambulism. They don't speak of it lightly here. To them, it isn't merely an odd sleep disturbance. It's a sinister phenomenon, a brush with something dark and beyond understanding. You edge closer, observing the man's eerie stillness. His wife speaks in a hushed, trembling voice, explaining that he's been rising from bed in the dead of night, wandering the streets with glassy eyes and vacant expression. He does not remember, she whispers, her voice thick with fear. But he mutters things he cannot possibly know. The others nod gravely. To them, sleepwalking isn't just a harmless quirk. It's a dangerous affliction, one believed to be tied to the supernatural. Some whisper that it's a sign of possession, that when the body moves without the mind's command, it's because something else has taken hold. You can't help but feel a chill at the thought. Still, others in the room offer more scientific explanations, though scientific in the loosest of senses. They speak of disturbed magnetism, incomplete nerve inhibition, and brain congestion, throwing around terms like confetti, none of which seem to soothe the growing tension. You listen as an elderly woman recounts a terrifying tale of her own brother, who once sleepwalked straight out of the house and nearly into the river. She swears he was pulled back at the last second by an unseen force, though some suspect she simply embellished the story to keep her audience rapt. As strange as it sounds, Victorians were genuinely terrified of sleepwalking. They believed it revealed hidden sins or secret desires, a glimpse of one's true self, stripped of polite restraint. Even now you can see the fear etched on their faces. To prevent these midnight wanderings, they've resorted to all manner of bizarre remedies. One man describes tying his own ankles to the bedposts with silk ribbons soaked in vinegar, claiming it grounds him to the physical world. Another suggests placing a basin of cold water beneath the bed, convinced that its presence somehow anchors the spirit during slumber. And then there's the sharpest solution of all, literally. Some households, it turns out, placed pins or needles in the folds of the bedclothes, believing that any movement would immediately awaken the sleeper with a sudden prick. You wince at the thought. Still, the most common advice, one that nearly everyone in the room agrees upon, is never to wake a sleepwalker suddenly. They speak in hushed tones about tales of those who were roused too quickly, only to collapse dead on the spot or fall into permanent madness. Of course, historians today scoff at these fears. Modern studies suggest that waking a sleepwalker is generally safe, though perhaps disorienting. But here in this lamplit parlour, surrounded by anxious neighbours and a man still trapped in his eerie trance, the old warnings feel chillingly real. You watch as his wife gently places a hand on his shoulder, her touch delicate, as if fearing he might shatter beneath her fingers. Slowly, gradually, his eyes begin to blink. A flicker of confusion crosses his face, followed by a deep, exhausted sigh. He looks around dazed, with no memory of what's transpired. The others breathe a collective sigh of relief, though the tension never fully leaves the room. You quietly take your leave, slipping out into the cold night once more. As you walk away from the house, you glance back one last time, watching as the candlelight fades behind the curtains. You can't help but feel a shiver, not from the cold, but from the strange notion that somewhere deep inside, we all carry that hidden self, the one that stirs when we sleep and walks unknown paths. Perhaps that's why sleepwalking fascinated and terrified the Victorians so deeply. It wasn't just the fear of wandering bodies. It was the fear of losing control, of glimpsing a side of oneself better left hidden. You pull your coat tighter, your breath curling in the air like smoke, and continue your journey through this city of restless minds and secret midnight wanderings. The night is far from over, and your path still stretches ahead, winding deeper into the heart of Victorian sleeplessness. You move farther down the narrow streets, the fog pressing close once more, thick and damp as a woolen blanket. The gas lamps glow dimly in the mist, casting faint halos of light. But the deeper you walk, the more the city seems to fold in upon itself. Eventually you stop before an unassuming townhouse, its windows shuttered tightly, its door bolted against the outside world. A faint light glimmers from within, and curiosity draws you forward. Inside, the air is still, almost too still, as though the house itself is holding its breath. Here, you've entered one of the more peculiar experiments of Victorian sleep culture. The windowless bedroom. Yes, tonight you'll witness a practice born from fear and fascination in equal measure. The deliberate sealing of sleeping chambers to create what was believed to be the perfect sleep environment. You watch as the homeowner, a wiry man with sharp features and deep-set eyes, moves methodically through his nightly routine. He locks every door, bolts every shutter, and carefully pulls heavy curtains across the remaining cracks of light. To the Victorians, fresh air was often seen as a double-edged sword. On one hand, there were those obsessed with ventilation, believing that stagnant air could breed disease and madness. But in the other camp, where this man firmly resides, there were those who feared night air above all else. The idea was simple, if not exactly logical. At night, the air outside was thought to become charged with dangerous properties, particularly in cities where fog mingled with coal smoke and sewage vapors. The solution? Seal everything. Seal. You watch as he carefully places draft stoppers along the floorboards, and even covers the fireplace with a thick cloth to prevent any errant breezes from sneaking in. He lights a single candle, the only glow permitted in the room, and places it on the mantel with great reverence. Its tiny flame quivers slightly, as if protesting its duty in such stifling quarters. You take in the scene, the walls lined with thick tapestries meant to muffle sound and absorb harmful emanations. Even the bed itself is encased in layers of drapery, transforming it into a small, airless fortress. He mutters softly to himself, reciting some half-remembered advice from a medical pamphlet. The body restores best in stillness, shielded from disruptive currents. You can't help but smirk. He's essentially turned his bedroom into a human-sized Tupperware container. But you also sense the genuine dread that drives him. His pale face glistens with a light sheen of sweat, though whether from the oppressive heat or from anxiety, it's hard to tell. In this sealed room, every creak of the floorboards sounds amplified, every breath heavier. Victorians believed that night air could carry not only disease, but also moral decay and spiritual unrest. They feared that leaving a window open after sunset could invite not just cold drafts, but also nightmares, nervous fits, or even madness. Some doctors advised patients to air out their rooms briefly during the day, but once night fell, they warned, it was safer to batten down the hatches. Of course, historians still argue whether these practices were rooted in actual health concerns. After all, London's air was notoriously polluted, or if they simply reflected deeper anxieties about the unknown dangers that lurked after dark. You watch as the man extinguishes his candle, plunging the room into total darkness. He climbs into bed, pulling the thick blankets over his head until he's barely visible. It's almost as if he's trying to vanish entirely, to dissolve into the stillness. You linger in the corner, the air growing heavier by the second. Even now you can feel how easily such a space could become suffocating, not just physically, but mentally. The absence of sound, of light, of movement, it presses on you, making every heartbeat thunder in your ears. And yet, the man seems at peace here. Or perhaps he's simply too exhausted by his nightly rituals to stay awake any longer. You leave him there, wrapped in layers of cloth and superstition, and step back into the night. The fresh air outside feels like a blessing, cool and sharp in your lungs after the stifling room you've just escaped. As you walk, you can't help but reflect on how much effort people have always been willing to exert in their pursuit of sleep, blocking out the world, sealing themselves away, all in the hope of finding a few hours of rest. And somehow, despite all their elaborate precautions, many of them still lay awake, staring into the dark, wondering why sleep continued to elude them. The fog thickens again as you make your way deeper into the heart of the city, the lamplight blurring into soft smudges in the distance. The night is far from done, and somewhere ahead, stranger remedies still await your curious gaze. The night air feels fresher as you continue walking, carrying with it the faint scent of coal smoke and distant chimney fires. But there's something else riding the breeze tonight. An earthy, herbal note that grows stronger with every step you take. Soon you arrive at a small shop tucked into a corner of a quiet street, its sign swinging gently overhead. The Somnolent Society, purveyors of restful sleep. You push open the creaking door and step inside. The room is dimly lit, lined with shelves of glass jars filled with dried herbs, roots and powders in every imaginable shade of brown and green. The air is thick with the mingled scents of lavender, valerian root, chamomile, and other strange musky things you can't identify. Behind the counter stands an elderly herbalist, her fingers stained from years of grinding leaves and measuring powders with the precision of a seasoned apothecary. Without even looking up, she says softly, "You're looking for something to soothe the mind." You can't help but smile at her certainty. She motions for you to sit near the counter, where she begins pulling jars down from the shelves, muttering to herself as she works. Victorians were fascinated by herbal remedies for sleep. In fact, they were positively obsessed with them. While some reached for opium or alcohol-laced tonics, others turned to plants, believing that nature offered gentler, safer solutions for weary souls. The herbalist begins to grind her ingredients with deliberate care. You watch as she mixes lavender, hops, and valerian root, creating a blend meant to be steeped in hot water just before bed. She explains in her low, steady voice that hops, commonly used to flavour beer, were believed to have sedative properties when brewed into a tea or stuffed into small sleep pillows. Valerian root, she says, was considered one of the most powerful natural tranquilizers of its time, strong enough to calm nervous fits and ease the troubled mind. She leans in slightly, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Of course," she says, "too much valerian can bring strange dreams, or leave you feeling quite unlike yourself in the morning." You can't help but chuckle. It seems that even the so-called gentle remedies of the Victorians carried a shadowed edge. She continues her work, mixing in chamomile for peace, and passion flower to ease the heart. A pinch of lemon balm follows. For sweetness, she explains, though whether she means the taste or the dreams, you aren't sure. As she works, she shares stories of her customers, artists, housewives, scholars, all coming to her in search of rest. One man, she says, visits every week for a special blend containing skullcap and wild lettuce, convinced it unlocks lucid dreaming. Another insists that he can't sleep without mugwort tucked under his pillow. You listen, amused by the array of characters drawn to this dim little shop. Historians still puzzle over the popularity of such herbal remedies in the Victorian era. Some believe it was a quiet rebellion against the rising dominance of industrialized medicine, a way to retain control, to seek comfort in something older and more familiar. Others suggest it was simply another form of escapism, yet another ritual to distract from the deeper, more troubling causes of insomnia. The herbalist offers you a small cloth pouch filled with her mixture, tied with a thin red ribbon. "Place this beneath your pillow," she instructs. "Breathe deeply as you settle in, and let the herbs carry your mind elsewhere." Her words are soft, but there's a certain gravity to them, as if she believes that herbs hold secrets beyond the physical. You thank her, tucking the pouch into your coat pocket as you prepare to leave. But before you step out into the fog once more, she adds one final warning, her eyes twinkling with dry amusement. "Don't forget," she says, "sometimes it's not the herbs keeping you awake. Sometimes it's what you bring to bed with you." Her meaning lingers in the air as you step back outside, the door creaking shut behind you. The fog feels different now, warmer, scented faintly with lavender and lemon balm from the herbs clinging to your clothes. You walk on, considering her words, wondering how many sleepless nights in this city were spent chasing the perfect combination of leaves and roots, convinced that sleep could be brewed in a teapot or tucked beneath a pillow. Perhaps some still believe it today. As the city stretches before you, quiet and heavy under the weight of its own restless dreams, You can't help but feel that you've only scratched the surface of these strange midnight rituals. The night presses onward, and your journey through the forgotten cures of Victorian insomnia continues, leading you ever deeper into the heart of their peculiar world. The streets feel quieter now, as though the very city itself has begun to doze, lulled by its own fog and silence. But you know better. Beneath this sleepy surface, the struggle against insomnia still rages in countless bedrooms, behind shuttered windows and bolted doors. Your steps guide you toward a grand old house perched at the corner of an otherwise empty square. Its tall windows are dark, but from within a faint, rhythmic tick-tick-tick drifts out, drawing you closer. Inside you find yourself in a parlour dominated by clocks, dozens of them, all shapes and sizes. Mantel clocks, wall clocks, pocket watches, even great-grandfather clocks with their long swinging pendulums. Their ticking fills the room like a heartbeat. You stand silently as the owner, a gaunt man with sharp eyes and nimble fingers, winds one of the larger clocks with a tiny silver key. "I used to suffer terribly from sleeplessness," he says, his voice calm but distant, "until I discovered the cure was simply time." You raise an eyebrow, but he gestures toward the clocks. "Most people fear the ticking," he explains, his fingers still turning the tiny key with a practiced touch. "They find it unnerving. But me? I listen to it. Every second is a step closer to sleep." Victorians had a strange relationship with time and its passage. For some, clocks were the enemy, reminders of every agonizing moment spent awake. For others, they became unexpected allies. You watch as the man settles into his chair, eyes half closed, listening intently to the overlapping ticks and tocks. "The key," he says, "is to surrender to it. Let the rhythm pull you along like waves on the shore." He smiles faintly, as if amused by your skepticism. You can't help but note how different this approach is from the frantic remedies you've seen elsewhere tonight. No herbs, no potions, no mechanical beds or sealed rooms, just the relentless, predictable cadence of time itself. Still, not everyone found comfort in clocks. You spot a curious device on the table nearby, a peculiar-looking alarm clock, its design oddly aggressive, with little brass hammers poised above tiny bells. The man notices your gaze and chuckles softly. "Ah, yes," he says, "not all clocks are soothing. Some are persuasive." He picks up the clock and explains its purpose. It's not meant to lull but to jolt, to startle the sleepless into slumber by sheer exhaustion. The theory, he says, is simple. You wind it, set it beside your bed, and it begins ticking, loudly, insistently. If you fall asleep, all is well. But if you fail to sleep before the bell strikes, well. He trails off, but you can easily imagine the cacophony. It sounds absurd, but apparently some Victorians believed that fear of the alarm would push them into sleep faster, much like how some people today insist on setting multiple alarms to trick themselves into resting sooner. You examine the clock more closely, noting how its hands are etched with tiny Latin phrases about sleep and morality. Reminders that time wasted in wakefulness was seen as both a spiritual and physical failure. The man returns to his chair and sighs softly. "People fear the night because they cannot control it," he muses. "But time? Time is always steady. It moves forward, no matter what we do. You listen to the clocks ticking all around you, their sounds weaving together into something strangely hypnotic. Historians still debate whether Victorian society's obsession with clocks and schedules worsened their insomnia. Some argue that strict timetables, factory hours, and train schedules heightened anxiety about time slipping away. Others suggest that the rhythmic ticking of clocks provided comfort, a reminder that life continued to move forward, no matter how dark or restless the night became. As you linger, you notice how the man's eyes grow heavier, his breathing slower, lulled by the very sound that once drove others mad. You leave him there, wrapped in the steady heartbeat of his clocks, and step back outside. The fog greets you like an old friend, cool and quiet against your skin. As you walk on, you realize that tonight's journey has become something of a clock itself, a series of steady, measured steps through the peculiar beliefs and remedies of the past, each moment pulling you deeper into this forgotten world. Somewhere another clock chimes softly, marking the hour. And you keep walking, following the rhythm of your own quiet footsteps deeper into the night. The clock's echoes fade behind you as you drift farther down the streets, their rhythm lingering faintly in your ears. The city has grown even quieter now. No carriages, no footsteps, only the soft whisper of fog against stone and glass. But soon another scent begins to pull you forward, rich, savoury and oddly comforting. You follow it toward a modest, warmly lit inn tucked at the corner of a narrow lane. The sign hanging above sways gently, creaking softly. The nightcap nook, victuals for restless souls. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of roasted meat, buttered bread, and something sweet simmering slowly in copper pots. At the long wooden tables sit weary patrons, their faces flushed from the heat and the hearty fare before them. Trenchers of bread, bowls of stew, and mugs of warm milk dot the tables, alongside thick slices of pudding and plates of cheese. Here, you've stumbled into one of the cosier corners of the Victorian world, where food was believed to be not only comfort, but cure. You take a seat in the corner, observing as the innkeeper, a stout woman with a wide smile and flour-dusted apron, circles the room with practiced ease, carrying plates piled high with steaming dishes. Nothing sends a body to sleep faster than a full belly, she declares, setting down another serving of what she calls slumber pudding. You watch as a gentleman digs in with gusto, spooning the dense, custard-laden dessert into his mouth as though it were medicine. Victorians had no shortage of theories about food and sleep. Many believed that certain dishes could ease the mind and prepare the body for rest. The innkeeper explains to her guests that slumber pudding is made with warm milk, honey, nutmeg, and sweet, a heavy combination meant to soothe and sedate. Nutmeg, in particular, was thought to have mild sedative effects, though it came with warnings about taking too much. One guest chuckles softly, claiming he once ate an entire pudding himself and spent the next day wandering in a daze. Others sip from mugs of warm posset, a mixture of hot milk curdled with ale or wine, sweetened and spiced to create a thick, frothy drink said to encourage sleep. You watch as a couple nearby shares a plate of stewed onions, which the innkeeper insists will draw the heat downward and prevent restless tossing. And then, of course, there's the ever-present bowl of soup. Victorians adored their sleep-inducing soups, particularly those made with leeks, onions, or garlic, simmered for hours to soften both the vegetables and, supposedly, the nerves. One man near you spoons his soup slowly, explaining to his table-mate that it warms the blood and settles the humours, quoting an old remedy he learned from his grandmother. It's both quaint and oddly familiar. Even now, many people still turn to certain comfort foods, warm milk, herbal teas, or heavy stews, when sleep refuses to come. Historians still puzzle over these culinary remedies. Some argue they had a basis in physiology. Warm, fatty foods may indeed trigger drowsiness by redirecting blood flow to digestion. Others suggest it was simply ritual comfort, the soothing act of eating something familiar and filling before bed. As the meal winds down, you notice how the room's energy shifts. The patrons lean back in their chairs, their movements slower, their eyelids heavier. The innkeeper lights a few more candles, their flames soft and low, and sets out small plates of aged cheese. "Cheese before bed?" one man teases. The innkeeper grins. "Only for those brave enough to dream." Ah yes, the old belief that cheese, particularly strong varieties like Stilton or Roquefort, could trigger vivid, bizarre dreams. Some swore by it, eagerly indulging in hopes of nighttime adventures. Others avoided it at all costs, fearing the strange visions it might bring. The debate continues even now, though whether cheese truly conjures strange dreams or simply feeds the imagination remains uncertain. You watch as the last plates are cleared away, the guests now sunk deep into their chairs, their earlier worries melted away with every bite and sip. Soon some begin to drift off right at the table, their snores mingling softly with the crackling of the hearth. You smile to yourself, slipping quietly out of the inn and back into the cool embrace of the night. The fog feels less heavy now, warmer perhaps, or maybe you're simply carrying the memory of the meal with you. As you walk, you reflect on the curious power of food, not just to nourish, but to comfort, to calm, to coax the body towards sleep. Perhaps the Victorians were right about one thing after all. Sometimes the quickest path to rest is a hearty meal shared in good company, where the worries of the day are slowly replaced by the warm glow of pudding and posset. The city stretches on ahead, quiet and endless, and your journey continues, each step drawing you deeper into the strange, sleepy rituals of the past. You leave the warmth of the inn behind, stepping once more into the hush of the streets, the fog still thick, but now tinged with the faintest scent of roasted onions and nutmeg. The city slumbers around you, or tries to at least, but your journey through its sleepless underbelly is far from finished. Soon the streets grow narrower, the buildings leaning in closer, their rooftops nearly touching above. Here, tucked between shadowed shops and shuttered houses, you spot a small doorway glowing with a strange blue light. The sign above reads simply, "The Gentle Current Society. Electrotherapy for the restless." Curiosity tugs at you once more. Inside, the room hums faintly, a low buzzing that tickles the back of your neck. Along the walls are curious machines, towers of polished brass and copper coils, each bristling with wires and dials that seem to hum with restrained energy. In the center of the room, an elderly gentleman reclines in a padded chair, his feet resting on a metal plate, while two electrodes shaped like small silver spoons are pressed gently against his temples. A technician in a white coat, meticulously clean and buttoned tight, stands nearby, adjusting the knobs of a machine labelled Somnus Restorator. "Now we begin," the technician intones as though initiating some sacred rite. With a soft click, the machine awakens, sending a faint pulse through the wires. You watch as the man's eyelids flutter, his body relaxing instantly as the device hums in steady rhythm. Victorians had a deep fascination with electricity, and they were convinced it held the power to cure nearly every ailment imaginable, insomnia chief among them. This particular treatment, known as electric nerve sedation, was designed to deliver mild, controlled shocks intended to calm the nervous system and induce sleep. The technician explains, his tone calm and rehearsed, that the brain's own electrical impulses could be retuned with external currents. Insomnia, he declares, is but an imbalance of energy. Too much here. He taps the temple gently. And too little here. He taps the heart. You watch, both amused and slightly horrified, as he turns the dial higher. The elderly patient lets out a soft sigh of contentment, as if slipping into a warm bath. Some Victorians swore by such treatments. Advertisements from the era promised miraculous results from devices like the electro-poise or the pulvermacher belt, machines that looked like props from a mad scientist's laboratory, but were marketed for home use. They claimed to cure everything from headaches to insomnia to nervous disorders, often with testimonials from satisfied customers who reportedly slept as soundly as babes after just one session. Of course, not everyone was convinced. Critics accused these devices of being little more than quackery, preying on desperate souls who would try anything for a night's rest. Historians today remain divided. Some suggest that the mild currents did have a placebo effect, while others argue that the practice was outright dangerous, especially when unregulated devices made their way into homes. Still, as you stand here watching the scene, you can't help but admit there's something oddly soothing about the rhythmic hum of the machinery, the soft flicker of the electrical arcs. The technician switches off the device with a gentle click. The room falls silent. The elderly man opens his eyes slowly, his face slack and peaceful. He smiles faintly and murmurs, "Like drifting on a cloud of quiet thunder." You're not sure whether to laugh or be impressed, as the technician prepares the next device, this one resembling a metallic crown with fine wires trailing down like ivy. You decide it's best to take your leave before they offer you a trial session. You step out into the night once more, your ears still ringing softly from the electric buzz. The fog closes around you again, but this time it feels charged, as though the city itself hums with hidden currents. You continue walking, reflecting on how far people have always been willing to go in pursuit of sleep. Herbs, potions, machinery, even electricity itself, all harnessed in the name of quieting the restless mind. And yet, despite all the shocks and sparks and coils, sleep remained as elusive as ever for many. You smile wryly to yourself. Somewhere ahead, more remedies and stranger beliefs await. The night is not finished with you yet, and neither is this city of sleepless souls. The lingering buzz of the electrotherapy salon still hums faintly in your ears as you walk deeper into the sleeping city. The fog grows thicker once again, muffling your footsteps until it feels as though you're floating down the street, carried along by the same unseen currents that seem to fill the air inside that peculiar room. Soon the streets widen, leading you toward a curious sight, an open doorway spilling out light and laughter into the fog. A sign above swings gently, bearing the words, "The Midnight Gymnasium, for the restoration of the restless." You can't help but raise an eyebrow. Inside, the space is large and airy, filled with the faint scent of leather and liniment oil. Men and women dressed in loose-fitting garments move through the room in slow, deliberate motions. But this isn't a gymnasium in the modern sense. No one here is lifting heavy weights or sprinting in place. Instead, they perform peculiar exercises, movements designed not to energize, but to exhaust. A man near the entrance slowly rotates his arms in wide circles, counting softly under his breath. Nearby, a woman leans forward from her waist, swinging her upper body like a pendulum, her long hair swaying with each motion. At the far corner, an instructor, stern and impeccably groomed, oversees a group engaged in what can only be described as rhythmic toe-tapping and head nodding, their faces blank but determined. You watch, both fascinated and bemused, as he walks among them, correcting their posture with a pointed cane. "Steady," he says. "Gentle. We seek not vigour, but surrender." Victorians, it seems, believed strongly in the power of physical movement to combat insomnia, but not the strenuous kind. This was therapeutic movement, carefully designed to quiet the mind by lulling the body into submission through repetition. They believed that certain motions could coax the nervous system into releasing its grip. easing the frantic mind into restfulness. You watch as another group begins a series of seated movements, each designed to gently sway the body. They roll their shoulders, sway their spines, and pat their knees in slow, soft rhythms. The instructor explains, in a tone both calm and slightly smug, that these movements redistribute the vital energies, directing them downward toward the limbs to draw tension away from the head. It's all quite serious, almost ritualistic in its precision. One woman nearby catches your gaze and smiles faintly, whispering that she hasn't slept properly in months, but that this nightly class has become her sanctuary. She demonstrates her favourite movement, a gentle rocking from side to side, paired with soft humming, and swears that after 20 minutes of this practice, her thoughts quiet enough for sleep to take hold. You can't help but be amused at the simplicity of it all. In a world obsessed with machines, potions, and strange devices, here is something as old as time itself, rhythm, breath, and gentle motion. Still, not all were convinced in the era. Some physicians argued that these nighttime exercises were nothing more than distraction, a way to trick desperate minds into believing they'd found relief. Others, however, insisted that physical movement helped release nervous energy, reducing the very excitability they blamed for insomnia. Historians today suggest that, oddly enough, these Victorians may have stumbled onto something real. Modern research points to the benefits of stretching, yoga, and slow repetitive movement in aiding sleep, though of course they now come without the fear of draining your vital essence. You watch the class continue, the room filled with soft shuffling sounds and the occasional sigh of contentment. The instructor calls for a final sequence, a slow swaying bow performed in unison. The group moves as one, their bodies bending forward and then rising, their motions steady and hypnotic. The instructor's voice lowers, guiding them gently. "Let the mind be quiet," he says. "Let the body lead." You almost feel yourself swaying along with them, lulled by the soothing cadence of their movement and breath. But you shake yourself free of the trance, stepping back toward the door as the class begins to wind down. Outside, the night air feels cooler against your skin, refreshing after the warmth of the gymnasium. As you walk on, you realize how simple their secret was, how little it took to convince the body to slow down. A few stretches, some deep breaths, a steady sway, and perhaps sleep wasn't so far out of reach after all. You chuckle softly, imagining how modern fitness gurus might market these movements today. Victorian sleep yoga, complete with silk corsets and candle-lit meditation. Still, you can't deny the quiet charm of it. You continue your journey, deeper into the night, the fog parting slightly before you. Somewhere ahead, more strange and forgotten remedies wait to be uncovered. And as you walk, you feel a faint sway in your step, as if your body, too, remembers the gentle rhythm of the midnight gymnasium. The fog curls gently around your legs as you continue onward, your pace slower now, the lingering sway from the midnight gymnasium still echoing in your steps. The city seems quieter than ever, as though most of its restless souls have finally surrendered to sleep, or at least given up the fight for the night. But just as you round a corner, a sharp chill slices through the mist. Ahead, a large stone building looms, its walls slick with condensation, its windows dark and uninviting. Yet from a crack beneath the heavy door, you see a faint wisp of steam curling out into the street. The carved plaque above the door reads simply, "The Bathing Society for Nervous Afflictions." Of course, you step inside. The air hits you immediately, dense, damp, and almost suffocating. A blend of steam, soap, and something faintly metallic clings to every surface. Inside, men and women in heavy wool robes sit quietly, their faces flushed, their brows slick with sweat. Some lounge beside steaming tubs carved from marble. Others sit in smaller wooden barrels, half submerged in cloudy water. You've stumbled into another favourite Victorian remedy for insomnia, hydrotherapy. Here, in this bathhouse, the belief is simple but intense. Water holds the power to soothe the mind, quiet the nerves, and finally deliver sleep. You watch as an attendant, a stout man with rolled sleeves and arms like tree trunks, prepares another treatment. He hauls a large copper kettle from the fire, carefully pouring its contents into a tub already filled with cool water. The steam rises instantly, swirling like smoke, as the temperature is adjusted to precise specifications. One woman steps gingerly into the tub, gasping slightly at the heat before settling in with a long sigh. The attendant explains in a matter-of-fact tone that this is the neutral bath, held at just the right temperature, not too hot, not too cold, to lull the nervous system into submission. Too cold, he warns, and the nerves will seize. Too hot and the heart will race. But this is balance. You listen as others describe their routines. Some swear by cold plunges followed by brisk rub-downs. Others prefer long soaks in tepid water, drifting in and out of consciousness as the heat pulls them towards sleep. Victorians approached hydrotherapy with near religious zeal. They believed water could wash away not just physical tension but moral impurities, drawing out toxins from both body and spirit. Some bathed in plain water, others in infusions of herbs, milk, or even salt water shipped in from coastal resorts. You spot another chamber nearby, where a smaller group gathers around an elaborate contraption, an upright wooden cabinet with a hole at the top for one's head. Inside, a man sits calmly, his face serene, while his body is entirely enclosed within the cabinet, steam visibly swirling around him. This is the steam box, designed to sweat out nervous energy without requiring the exertion of a full bath. You can't help but marvel at the scene. Half spa, half science experiment. One elderly gentleman nearby explains that he visits twice a week, claiming the treatments have cured his night terrors and restored his appetite for sleep. Sleep is like a garden, he says with a knowing smile. It must be watered and sometimes boiled. You stifle a laugh. Still, not everyone shared this devotion to bathing. Some doctors warned that too much hot water could weaken the body, leaving it vulnerable to chills and sickness. Others believed that hydrotherapy's effects were temporary at best, another fleeting comfort for people unwilling to face the real roots of their sleeplessness. Historians today still debate its effectiveness. Some suggest that the soothing properties of warm water likely offered genuine relief, while others argue that it was mostly ritual, an elaborate prelude to bed, more about the process than the result. You watch as the woman in the neutral bath slowly drifts off, her head lolling to one side, her breaths growing deeper and slower. The attendant carefully times her soak, then gently guides her out, wrapping her in thick woolen blankets, before leading her to a quiet room lined with cots for post-bath rest. You linger a moment longer, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling, the air thick with warmth and quiet surrender. Then, with a deep breath, you slip back outside into the cool night. The fog feels sharper now, the damp air refreshing after the thick heat of the baths. Your skin still tingles faintly from the humidity, as though some trace of that strange ritual clings to you. As you walk, you can't help but think of all the people still soaking in their tubs, wrapped in steam and wool, convinced that water alone can wash their worries away. Perhaps in its own way, it can. You continue down the silent streets, your footsteps steady and sure, knowing that the night still holds more secrets yet to be revealed. And somewhere ahead, in the twisting lanes of this sleepless city, another forgotten remedy is waiting for you to discover it. The night air feels sharper now, cutting through your clothes as you leave the steamy warmth of the bathhouse behind. The city stretches before you like a maze of shadows and narrow lanes, but you feel no hurry. After all, there's nowhere to be but here, following the quiet pull of forgotten remedies and restless souls. As you wander deeper into the fog-laced streets, a new sound drifts towards you, a low murmur punctuated by soft bursts of laughter and animated whispers. It leads you to a small, book-lined shop tucked beneath a leaning stone archway, its windows glowing faintly with candlelight. The sign above the door reads, "The Society of Somnolent Scholars, Reflections on Sleeplessness." You step inside. Immediately, the scent of aged paper and beeswax fills your nose, warm and familiar. Shelves crammed with books tower over you on every side, and in the middle of the room sits a gathering of men and women in deep conversation, each with an open journal or notebook in hand. Here you've arrived at perhaps the strangest remedy of all, the art of documenting one's sleeplessness. You listen as a thin, spectacled man reads aloud from his leather-bound journal, his voice calm but tinged with fatigue. "Last night," he begins, "the hours slipped past without mercy. I heard the city's every creak and groan, but at precisely 2 a.m, I felt the stirring of a thought, and I wrote it down." The others nod in understanding, their pens poised above their own pages, ready to capture every subtle twitch of their restless minds. This is no ordinary book club. It's a gathering of those who believe insomnia is not a curse to be cured, but an experience to be studied, dissected, even savoured. They speak of their sleepless nights with a kind of reverence, recounting each moment with exquisite detail. The temperature of the room, the exact position of their limbs, the texture of their sheets. Some record their diets, convinced that certain foods triggered their wakefulness. Others meticulously track their moods, phases of the moon, or even passing weather patterns, searching for connections. You can't help but smile at their devotion. To them, sleeplessness is not merely a state of discomfort. It's a puzzle, a riddle to be unravelled with ink and patience. One woman flips through her notebook, her pages crammed with looping handwriting and tiny sketches of clocks, teacups, and storm clouds. She explains softly that she's kept a night journal for over 5 years, documenting every night she fails to sleep. "It helps to see it on paper," she says, "to know it has shape, that it isn't endless." There's something almost tender in her words. You realise that for many Victorians, the act of recording sleeplessness became a ritual of control. In a time when medical remedies often failed or proved too dangerous, writing offered a safe and private outlet for their frustrations and fears. Historians still debate whether such practices truly helped. Some argue that these nightly journals only deepened the obsession with sleep, making it even more elusive. Others suggest it was a form of early cognitive therapy, a way to release the mind's spirals onto the page and free oneself from their grip. As you listen, another member of the group, an older gentleman with ink-stained fingertips, shares an excerpt from his journal written in a particularly sleepless stretch. "At precisely 3:30, I ceased trying to sleep. I accepted the night as it was, a companion rather than an adversary. In that moment I was no longer a victim of insomnia, but its witness." The room falls quiet, the weight of his words settling over the group like a soft blanket. There's a strange peace here, you realise, a shared understanding that not every night must end in sleep. Sometimes it's enough simply to be awake and aware, to witness the turning of the hours and know that morning will come regardless. You watch as the group begins to pack up their journals, their faces calm, almost content. Candles are extinguished one by one, plunging the room into gentle darkness. As you step back out into the foggy street, the night feels softer somehow, less heavy. You walk on, the city quiet around you, the words of those sleepless scholars lingering in your mind. Perhaps there is something to be learned from them after all, that not every night must be conquered or fixed. Some nights are meant simply to be observed, recorded, and remembered. Your journey continues, the path ahead winding deeper into the heart of the city's strangest beliefs, and somewhere in the distance another remedy awaits, ready to whisper its secrets in the hush of the night. The fog coils tightly now, soft as wool around your ankles, blurring the edges of the streets and muffling the sounds of your own footsteps. The city feels even more hushed, as if every window hides a sleeper, every alleyway a secret. But soon you notice another faint light ahead, this one flickering in a quiet, almost nervous way, as though unsure whether to invite you closer or push you away. You follow it naturally. The glow leads you to a modest townhouse, its windows draped in thick curtains. The door is ajar, and a faint scent of ink and old paper drifts out, mingling with the ever-present fog. Inside, the air feels dense, heavy with the weight of unfinished thoughts and anxious scribbles. Here you've arrived at one of the most peculiar corners of the Victorian world, a place where insomnia wasn't merely feared or studied, but meticulously measured and perfected. Welcome to the obsession with the perfect sleep. You watch as a man sits hunched over a long desk, surrounded by stacks of notebooks, ledgers, and strange devices. Scales for weighing blankets, rulers for measuring pillow height, thermometers for tracking room temperature down to the half degree. His face is pale, drawn, and deeply lined, the unmistakable look of someone who has spent far too many nights chasing something just beyond reach. He doesn't notice you at first. His attention is fixed on a delicate silver pocket watch in one hand and a quill in the other, recording precise notes in a leather-bound journal labelled Somnus Log, Volume 8. He murmurs as he writes, his voice soft but tense. 11:37. Bed adjusted to 12 inches from floor. Feather pillow replaced with horsehair. Last meal, boiled chicken, consumed at 5:15. No stimulants. Room temperature, 62 degrees Fahrenheit. He pauses, then adds with a frown, mood, mildly apprehensive. You can't help but stare. Here, sleep has been transformed into an experiment, an exact science to be quantified and mastered. Victorians like this man believed deeply in the pursuit of ideal sleep hygiene, though their definitions of it were elaborate, to say the least. He begins adjusting various objects around the room. The curtains must fall precisely 2 inches beyond the windowsill. The candle must be snuffed at exactly the same time every night, neither earlier nor later. The sheets are smoothed repeatedly, his hands moving with the precision of a surgeon, ensuring no wrinkle or crease can disturb his carefully calibrated environment. You watch, equal parts amused and unsettled, as he winds a small device that emits a soft, rhythmic clicking sound. A mechanical white noise machine designed to drown out street noise. Everything in this room is dedicated to the singular goal of achieving the perfect sleep. And yet, as you observe him move through his routine, you sense something else simmering beneath the surface. A quiet desperation, a tension wound so tightly that it hums in the air. This isn't peace, it's obsession. You begin to realize that he hasn't slept much at all. Despite all his efforts, every adjustment, every record, every scientifically optimized detail, his eyes are still sunken, his skin sallow, his hands trembling slightly as he jots down more notes. Historians have long debated this peculiar Victorian fixation. Some suggest it arose from the era's growing obsession with order, control, and self-improvement. In an age of industrial schedules and strict moral codes, even sleep became a battleground for discipline and optimization. Others argue that the more people tried to perfect sleep, the further it slipped from their grasp, trapped by the very anxiety their quest had created. You watch as he settles into bed, carefully aligning himself according to the measurements noted in his journal. But even as he lies perfectly still, you can see the tension in his face, the way his eyes flutter behind closed lids, unable to fully surrender. It's hard not to feel a pang of sympathy. In his effort to master sleep, he's built a prison of his own making, one where rest is something to be earned, measured, and recorded, rather than something to be allowed. You linger a moment longer, watching as he tries and fails to drift away. Then you step outside once more, the door clicking shut behind you. The fog greets you like an old friend, cool and quiet, wrapping around you with a softness that feels far more forgiving than anything in that suffocating room. You walk on, your thoughts turning over what you've just witnessed. How strange it is, you realize, that sometimes the harder we chase sleep, the further it seems to run. Perhaps in the end, it isn't something to be seized or forced, but something to be invited, welcomed like an old friend, and trusted to arrive in its own time. The night deepens, and your journey winds onward, still following the hidden trails of Victorian dreams and forgotten remedies. Somewhere ahead you sense there remains one final chapter in this curious tale of sleeplessness. The streets grow emptier still as you continue, the fog now so thick it feels as though you're walking through a dream yourself, each step soft, every sound distant and muffled, as if the city is fading into quiet oblivion. But you press on, guided by some unseen thread, until the fog parts just enough to reveal your next destination, a stately old building, taller than the others you've passed, with heavy curtains drawn tightly over every window. The brass plaque beside the door reads simply, "The Last Resort, a clinic for the chronically sleepless." You step inside, and immediately the air changes. It's quieter here than anywhere you've been tonight. Not just quiet, but carefully, meticulously silent. The walls are padded in thick velvet, the floor muffled by dense carpeting, and even the lamps glow dimly, their light filtered through layers of frosted glass. This is not a place for laughter or conversation. Here, the people you see move slowly, almost weightlessly, their footsteps soundless as they shuffle along in soft slippers, wrapped in layers of wool robes. You've reached the end of the Victorian journey into Insomnia, the place where those who tried everything else finally arrived. This was where the incurables came, the ones who had burned through every tonic, every herbal tea, every electric device and midnight exercise. And now they sought something more extreme. You watch as a nurse-like figure glides past, her face expressionless, carrying a tray of small vials and glass droppers. She pauses by one of the patients, an elderly man seated in an oversized chair, staring blankly into the fireless hearth. Without a word, she administers a few drops of a cloudy liquid onto his tongue. He swallows obediently, his eyelids already growing heavier. This is the realm of the chemical sleepers. Here, there is no pretense of mild remedies or comforting routines. Only the blunt force of powerful sedatives, substances like chloral hydrate and paraldehyde, both beloved and feared in the Victorian era. The nurse explains softly to another visitor that chloral hydrate is known as knockout drops among the staff. Effective, yes, but with a taste so bitter, it must be mixed with strong spirits or syrup to make it bearable. You watch as another patient receives a dose, their body going limp within minutes, their breathing growing slow and steady, but their face still etched with worry even as they drift away. There's a strange mood here, not quite comfort, not quite dread. It's as if everyone has accepted that they're no longer trying to cure insomnia, they're simply trying to survive it. You notice the ledgers stacked on a nearby desk, each one filled with detailed patient records. They read like quiet tragedies, names, dates, dosages, hours slept, side effects noted in careful script. Some entries are chillingly blunt. Patient number 27. Restful for 3 nights following administration of 30 drops chloral hydrate. Increasing irritability during waking hours. Reports vivid nightmares of drowning. Sleep remains elusive without chemical assistance. Others are heartbreakingly resigned. Patient number 42. Unresponsive to all known treatments. Maintained on minimal doses for comfort. No expectation of improvement. Historians still debate the use of these substances. Some argue they offered a rare mercy in an age with few real medical options for severe insomnia. Others see them as early examples of dangerous dependency, creating more problems than they solved. As you observe, you notice the subtle signs of that toll. Some patients here are calm, yes, but others show the unmistakable signs of long-term sedation, tremors, sluggish speech, vacant eyes. It's clear that many of them no longer sleep naturally at all. They simply drift in and out of chemically induced stupors, their nights blurred into an endless fog. You quietly step away, leaving the patients to their hushed world of velvet and vapour. Outside, the cool fog feels sharper than ever, almost bracing after the heavy stillness of the clinic. You walk on, your breath curling in the air. Of all the places you visited tonight, this one lingers with you the most. A sobering reminder of how far people have always been willing to go for sleep, even at the cost of their waking lives. And yet, even here, in the most extreme corners of the Victorian insomnia labyrinth, there remains that same unshakable hope. The belief that somewhere, beyond the next remedy, the next dose, the next long night, sleep still waits. Your steps grow slower now, as though the weight of every story you've heard tonight has settled upon your shoulders. But there is one more place yet ahead, one more chapter in this strange winding tale. And you walk toward it, guided now by something softer, not curiosity but a quiet, steady pull toward rest. The streets are nearly empty now, just you in the fog, moving through a city that feels half asleep, half vanished. Each step echoes softly, the cobblestones slick beneath your shoes, the lamplight thinning until it glows like distant stars. You keep walking, knowing this is the end of the trail, the final stop on this long winding journey through the sleepless world of the Victorians. And then you see it. A small cottage tucked quietly at the edge of a narrow lane, its windows glowing with the faintest amber light. No sign hangs above its door. No brass plaque or bold lettering announces its purpose. But you know. You step inside, and warmth wraps around you instantly. Not the heat of a fire or the suffocating steam of a bathhouse, but something softer. A quiet warmth, like the last glow of embers before sleep. The room is simple, worn wooden floors, shelves lined with books and dried flowers, a kettle simmering gently over a low flame. In a chair by the window sits an old woman, wrapped in a patchwork shawl, her face soft with age, but bright with a knowing smile. She gestures for you to sit. No words are exchanged. She pours you a cup of something fragrant, herbal, but unlike anything you've encountered before. You breathe it in, the scent light and calming, notes of lemon balm, rose, and something faintly sweet like honeycomb. You sip. It's soothing, but not in the way the other remedies were. It doesn't push or pull, it simply is. The woman settles back in her chair, gazing out the window into the fog. Her voice, when she finally speaks, is soft and steady. Some things aren't meant to be cured, she says. Some things just have to be accepted. You sit in silence, letting her words settle over you like a blanket. She speaks again slowly, as if reading from a long-forgotten page of her own story. There were many before you, she murmurs, her eyes half closed. Those who chased sleep through bottles, through wires, through herbs and prayers. Some caught it, most didn't. Her voice carries no judgment, only kindness, and perhaps a trace of melancholy. She continues, her words slow and rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. You see, sleep doesn't live in the bottle or the tonic. It doesn't hide in the ticking of clocks or the hush of baths. It comes when it's ready. It leaves when it must. She pauses to sip her tea, then smiles faintly. And sometimes, she adds, the trick isn't finding sleep at all. It's learning how to rest, even without it. You understand now why you were led here. This isn't a place of remedies or cures. It's a place of surrender. The old woman says nothing more, and neither do you. Instead, you sit together in quiet, watching the fog curl and drift outside the window. The city wrapped in its endless, sleepless dreams. Minutes, or perhaps hours, pass like this, time losing its edges. The candle on her table burns lower and lower, its flame growing softer until it's little more than a whisper of light. And somehow, as you sit there, you feel something shifting within you. The weight of the night easing, the sharpness of your thoughts softening, like ink fading on old paper. No urgency, no striving, just stillness. Outside, the fog thickens once more, but you barely notice. Your eyes grow heavy, not in the desperate, grasping way of earlier, but gently, naturally, like the slow closing of a book at the end of a long, satisfying story. And in this quiet place, where nothing is forced and nothing is chased, you feel it, at last. Sleep, not the kind prescribed or measured or chased down winding streets, but the sleep that arrives unbidden, soft and patient when you finally stop searching for it. The old woman's voice is the last thing you hear, a soft murmur carried on the quiet air. Rest now. You've wandered far enough. And so you do. The night fades, the cottage dissolves, and the city drifts away, leaving only warmth, stillness, and the soft hum of peace. End of script. Sweet dreams,